Welcome back to the Tiny Podcast. Today I have with me Robert Harris for our Bicentennial special to talk about the Buffalo Soldier. Welcome, Robert. How are you?
I'm well. Thank you.
Thank you so much for being here.
It's my honor.
Your book is amazing. I really appreciate it. So let's talk about you first. So tell us a little bit about yourself.
My name is Bob Harris. I am a member of the Buffalo Soldier Motorcycle Club. I'm a veteran of an Army veteran of 9 years. I've served in Korea as well as Berlin, Germany.
Thank you for your service.
I'm married to my beautiful wife, Lorene. We have two sons, Greg and Ronnie, one daughter, the lovely Michelle, and my grandsons, Garrison and Greg, and my granddaughter, Gabrielle.
Nice. Well, thank you for being here. So tell us about the book. So what is the book and what kind of started your journey with that?
Yeah, my book, I'm the historian of the club, of the Buffalo Soldier, our chapter. And each month what I do is I try to present a paragraph on African-American history, specifically the Buffalo Soldiers and some African-Americans, the military contributions. I usually write a paragraph every month at our monthly meeting, and some of the guys have suggested that, hey, Bob, seeing as how you're doing all these things, why don't you put this together in a book form? So I could never write a book, so I gave it a try. I submitted the manuscript to a publisher, and they said it's something that they might be interested in doing. And this was about maybe 2.5 years ago. And as a result, I have the historical moments, military contributions of the African American.
It's a beautiful book. I'm so glad that they encourage you to do that.
Thank you.
It is. I've read it. It is one of the most eye-opening and also just interesting books that I've read in a while. I'm also a veteran, Army veteran. I am not necessarily, I haven't always been the biggest history buff, but I think that the older I get, the more I realize how important it is, and the more that and also the more I see how much of history I've missed and how much of history I just haven't even heard of. This is a great example.
Yeah, well, I've always been a history buff. As a matter of fact, that was my best subject in school, history, and especially military history and the untold story of the African American. That really just sort of struck my interest, because I found out that every time I read just a little something on our contributions, it led to something else. And it just became so interesting that I said, wow, this is something I really wanted to delve into.
Yeah.
And that's what happened.
Well, it's fantastic. Well, we're going to delve into it today because I think that that's a great idea. I think that a lot of people could benefit from just knowing this stuff. It is very interesting information and also very eye-opening information. So if you're okay with it, we'll talk about a little bit. We'll just go through the history a little bit.
Well, give it a shot.
All right. Well, we'll go for it. I love it. I love the enthusiasm. All right. So why don't we start with the Revolutionary War? Let's talk about the Boston Massacre, because I feel like that was a huge, kind of tipping point for us, here.
Yeah.
And so I'm sure I learned of Crispus Attucks. I'm sure I remember that name. Okay. That name is familiar, but realizing the significance of Crispus Attucks and him being, correct me if I'm wrong, he was the first casualty.
Yes, he was. Crispus was the first casualty in the revolution. The way it started was that Crispus Attucks, he was a black man, part Indian and part African American, and he was also a dock worker. At that time, the American colonists were sort of against the British occupation of Boston. Crispus, along with several other patriots, later to become patriots, they were protesting in front of what was called a common house, which is now known as a bank.
Oh, okay.
This bank, or this common house, was guarded by several members of the King's Dragoon. I think it was the 29th Dragoon. There was a confrontation there in where Crispus, along with these other patriots, I think it was 6 or 7 others, were allegedly throwing rocks at the soldiers protesting the occupation. The soldiers fired upon them, Crispus Attucks being the first one to be killed. Now, in our history, this is known as the Boston Massacre. However, the English consider this the incident on King Street.
Yeah.
Now, as a result of this, the King's Dragoon, they were tried, they went to court. However, they had a very shrewd, smart lawyer who got them off with just, they were charged with self-defense because they claimed that the protesters were not only throwing rocks and bottles, the soldiers or these dragoons, their lives were in danger, and the soldiers fired upon them in self-defense. This smart lawyer that they had, the dragoons had, he would not have any of the Boston not patriots, but the citizens of Boston on the trial, on the jury, rather, during the trial. And instead of being charged, as I said, they were charged with protecting themselves or something like this here. And what really amazed me was the fact that this smart, shrewd lawyer that got them off with just more or less a slap on the wrist was none other than John Adams, the second president of the United States.
That is par for the. I feel like after reading your book, that is like par for the course of what goes on.
Weird.
Oh my god, I didn't. That's an interesting fact. I did not realize that. Also, okay, that's all right. Well, so let's talk about. So after that happened, so now the war has started. Now Crispus Attucks being, a black man who's the first person killed, I could imagine that would, kind of rally the people. And
It was. And what happened was that there were several other prominent African Americans that participated in the war. Actually, there were, I think, something like 5,000 African Americans that fought in the Revolution, both with the Patriots as well as the British.
Yeah.
Some of them were fighting at Bunker Hill, like what's his name? Peter Salem, Salem Poor. I can't.
Prince Hall.
Paul. And there was also one that really stood out was James Robert. Now, I mentioned James in the books. James was a slave that belonged to, was owned by the, what's his name? The French, not the French, a general or a colonel in George Washington's army.
Okay.
So when the revolution started, James went along with these Shields. That was his name. These Shields. James fought alongside these Shields with the promise that if the Americans won the war, then he would be set free. After the war ended, the Shields passed away. He died before he had the opportunity to set James free. So naturally, at that time, all of the Shields' property, James being one of his property or his possession, James was sold to a plantation owner in Louisiana. Now, during the Second Revolution, or the War of 1812, the last time the British came in, Colonel Andrew Jackson at the Battle of New Orleans, Jackson needed men because the army had been depleted. Jackson needed men, so what he did was he went around, he recruited Kentucky riflemen, free black men, Choctaw Indians, slaves from this plantation, James being one of these slaves. and a group of pirates under the command of John Lafitte.
Mm-hmm.
At the Battle of New Orleans, we all know what happened. The American forces soundly defeated the British.
Yep.
Now, once again, the slaves that were promised freedom that fought in the War of 1812, they were supposed to be set free.
Right.
What happened was that the white townspeople in New Orleans were afraid of the fact that there were so many armed black men, and they were afraid of another or a black revolution. So what they did was they convinced Andrew Jackson to disarm the slaves and all of the black men
Who had just fought.
who had just fought.
Who had just fought bravely
Who had fought
to help
bravely.
America.
Now-
Yeah. Okay.
What James said had he known that this was going to happen, and had pardon me, had his rifle been loaded, he would have killed Andrew Jackson.
Yeah, I love you put that quote in the book, and that quote was powerful.
Now, what happened? What would have happened? Just imagine, had James shot Jackson, Andrew Jackson, he would have never been president, of course. But the first thing that Jackson did was, when he became president, was he signed an act for a relocation of the American Indians in the South, in all the southern states. That was also known as the Trail of Tears in 1831.
Yep.
Once he relocated all of these Indians to what was then called Indian Territory or the state of Oklahoma, he sold all the land in the South that the Indians had occupied to white farmers or white plantation owners, because the land was fertile and really good for one crop, or two crops actually, cotton and tobacco.
Yep.
So you needed the slaves to work the cotton fields and the
Yep.
tobacco fields, and this sort of extended slavery just a little bit longer
Wow,
than it
yeah.
normally would have, because a lot of the European companies, a lot of the European countries had already abolished slavery.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now, and one other incident about the Revolutionary War, as I mentioned, the blacks that fought with the English on the side of the English, they came out a lot better than the African Americans that fought with the American forces. The blacks that fought on the side of the English were put on a list that they called the Book of Negroes. Okay, at the end of the war, they were taken to New York, put on a ship, and they were sent to the English colonies, Sierra Leone, Jamaica, and all of the English colonies. So they came, and even Nova Scotia. This is how blacks came up, become to be populated up in Canada. So they came out a lot better than the African Americans or the blacks that fought on the side of the Americans, because some were given their freedom, but most of them were put back into slavery or servitude.
Right. And you rely on slavery for years, and they don't know how to, none of these guys know how to handle. And it's not only that, we'll talk about Theodore Roosevelt later, and because
that's a story in
that's a whole
itself.
Brownsville was a whole
Oh my
so
gosh.
but we'll talk about that later. But there's a history, a consistent history of leaders of, whether it be the military or the government, promising things to the African Americans in order to get them to win them the wars.
That's
Yeah,
mainly
and
it.
so we will continue to touch on the history of being lied to.
Okay.
But let's move on. Let's move on a little bit. Let's talk a little bit about the 29th Infantry in Connecticut. So that was tell me a little bit about that.
29th fought during the Civil War.
During the Civil War, okay.
During the Civil War, there were 179,000 African Americans that fought in the Civil War. Of those 179,000, 139,000 lost their lives, and of the 179,000, there were 19 that were awarded the Congressional Medal of Honor. The 29th was a regiment that was formed just after the 54th Massachusetts, up in Boston. 29th was formed because the governor, and his name escaped me, the governor of Connecticut saw the success of colored troops with the 54th, and so he organized the 29th. When the 29th were deployed to the South, they were sent off by Frederick Douglass down in New Haven, Connecticut. Some of the 29th, they're buried on Main Street in Hartford. There's a cemetery just off of Main Street.
Oh, wow.
And yeah, a lot of the 29th are buried in that cemetery.
Wow, that's awesome.
Yeah, but the regiment was formed just after the 54th, and we all know the 54th from the movie Glory, with Denzel, So that was a result of the formation of the 29th.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, just because the Mass governor had the 54th, and his name escaped me, the governor of Connecticut at that time.
Yeah, but that's interesting though that they see a pattern of success. It's starting to see. It's kind of one of the first times that somebody is acknowledging the contribution. Hey, these soldiers are great soldiers.
Yeah, and as I said, there was 17, 19, and some, I don't know the exact number, that were awarded the Medal of Honor, and also there was a General Butler, James Butler, who had commanded African American troops, and they fought so valiantly that he created a medal. I have a copy of one.
Oh, do you?
I really wish I had bought it, but he created a medal to honor these African Americans called the Butler Medal. It was a red, white, and blue stripe with a silver medallion, and on the inscription on the back, it said the motto in Latin: "Victory will be theirs by the sword." And the front of the medal showed 3 or 4 African Americans armed and charging forward.
Wow. That's a beautiful medal.
Beautiful medal.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I really wish I had bought it.
Yeah, no, it's okay. We'll get a picture of it or something. Yeah, we'll definitely.
I have it in the book. I think it's in the book.
Oh, beautiful.
There's a picture of it in the book.
We'll throw it right up there so everybody can see it, because visuals are important to me, and I think it's a beautiful medal.
Yeah.
So, and then also some Medal of Honor recipients during that time, Civil War era: Powhatan Beatty, Robert Blake, William H. Carney, James D. Gardner, John Lawson, just to name a few.
Carney won the Medal of Honor. Carney was with the 54th Mass.
Oh, okay.
At the charge at Fort Wagner, or the assault on Fort Wagner. And they never really took the fort. They had lost, I think it was 50% of casualties taking that fort. But Carney was the flag bearer, or the standard bearer, charging up the hill, attacking Fort
Very important
Carney.
role.
Yeah, because a lot of the soldiers during battle and during that time, they would look towards the flag, and they would sort of rally around the flag. Once they saw the flag waving, then they would follow the flag.
Right.
And the standard bearer was very, very important during those battles, because it was like a rallying point.
Yeah.
These guys, hey,
it's like how far we've made it.
Right, let's rally around the flag. And Carney, once he went up the hill, and the Union forces were defeated eventually, Carney stated that that old flag never touched the ground, which is, as you know, as a veteran, it's disrespectful to have the flag touch the ground. You don't do that.
Yeah. Kept it up.
Yeah, that's one thing he said. It never touched the ground.
Yeah, and those battles were vicious, and they were
they were considering the weapons that they had.
Yeah.
It was just
chaos.
Unbelievable.
Yeah. So let's move forward in time a little bit. We've talked about the Civil War, the Revolutionary War a little bit. We'll probably still kind of have a little crossover. But let's talk about the Buffalo Soldiers and like the original Buffalo Soldiers. When they were given the name. So give me a little bit about that. How did the Buffalo Soldiers get their name?
Yeah, just after the Civil War, in 1866. Okay, once again the army had been depleted, and it was the 38th Congress, first session of the 38th Congress, that enacted legislation for the formation of 4 infantry units and 2 cavalry units made up of what they called at the time colored troops.
Okay.
The infantry units were given the designation of the 38th, 39th, 40th, and 41st Infantry, and the cavalry units were given the designation of the 9th and the 10th Cav. Now, in 1870, the 38th and 41st Infantry were combined to make up the 24th Infantry.
Okay.
And the 39th and 40 were combined to make up the 25th Infantry.
Okay.
And those 2 units, the 24th and the 25th Infantry, are still active in today's Army. They got their start being black outfits. The 9th was formed in a place called Greensville, Louisiana, which I believe is just outside of New Orleans.
Okay.
And the 10th was formed at Fort Leavenworth. They were assigned to the Western frontier from 1867 to, I think it was 1906, all that period of time. Now, while being assigned to the Western frontier, in addition to having engaging in the wars with the Indians, they built the roads, bridges, telegraph lines. They escorted surveyors. They protected the stagecoaches, protected the settlers moving west, the wagon trains moving west. They guarded the gold fields.
They did everything.
They did just about everything that you could possibly think of that you would see on television today in Western movies.
Yeah.
1 out of every 5th trooper on the Western frontier was an African American.
Wow.
The name Buffalo Soldiers is very, very, very interesting. As the story goes, or as the legend goes, there was a private by the name of John Randall.
Okay.
Randall was assigned to Fort Sill, Oklahoma, which is at that time Indian Territory, what they called Indian Territory. And Randall was given the assignment of escorting 2 white surveyors in Indian Territory. They were attacked by a war party, they say, of several, Cheyenne Indians. Okay. The surveyors were killed in the initial attack, and Randall had received several wounds. But he managed to survive, and he held off the Indians, armed with a saber and just a pistol, until some miners in a nearby mining camp, they heard the gunfire, and they came to rescue Randall. Now, when the miners showed up, naturally the Indians took flight. But the Cheyenne, now this was the first engagement, allegedly the first engagement that the Plains Indians had with the black soldier. We were strange-looking creatures to him because they had been accustomed to fighting white soldiers.
Yeah.
So it wasn't long after that engagement that the Cheyenne started to spread the word that, hey, look, we're fighting a new, strange-looking soldier. This soldier, his hair is real matted, like the head of the buffalo. His skin is real brown, like the hide of the buffalo. And he's got real dark eyes, piercing eyes, just like the buffalo. And even though you can stab him or shoot him, if you don't kill him, he will fight like a cornered, wounded buffalo.
Wow, yeah.
So, as a sign of respect for this strange looking soldier, first they were calling them wild buffaloes. Later, that became buffalo soldiers.
Wow.
That's how they got the name.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah. The two words that I often use in my presentation to the school kids, the two words I use are in the language of the Lakota Sioux, the words are tatanka, akishita. Tatanka, akishita. And basically, Luli freely translated that means the soldier who looks like a buffalo.
Wow, so that's interesting. Yeah, it's definitely see, at first glance, it's like, oh, we saw, okay, looks like a buffalo, but they don't go, you stab him and he keeps fighting. That is a testament to the black soldier.
It is.
Yeah,
and because the Indians held and still hold the buffalo in such a high regard.
Yeah, that's sacred.
That is such an honor.
Yeah.
Pardon me. The 10th Cavalry was such an honor that the 10th Cavalry, they adopted the buffalo as the insignia. I have one on here. I had two. One would be facing left and the other would be facing to the right. And you wore them on each lapel so that the person in the center of these two buffaloes facing this way would always be under the watchful eye of the buffalo.
I love that. That's amazing.
I lost one. I've got to get another one.
Still, though, I love that
There's only
sentiment.
one watching me now.
Hey, one's better than none.
Yeah.
That's amazing. Thank you for sharing that. I really appreciate that. Let's talk about some the Buffalo Soldiers that were pretty significant during that time. Let's start off first with Kathy Williams.
Kathy Williams, what an interesting story.
Yeah.
Kathy, in the history of all of the Buffalo Soldiers, there has only been one female to become a Buffalo Soldier.
Yeah.
And that was Kathy Williams. Her story, her story was that Kathy was a slave in Missouri. And during the Civil War, the Union Army, as they occupied Southern territory, they would free the slaves. And the slaves that they freed, they called contraband. With the women, they took the women and they made the women cooks, or what do we call it, laundress, And the men, they would have them build fortifications and roads and just sort of manual labor.
Manual labor, yeah.
Kathy, there was a white infantry outfit, I think from Indiana. I think it was the 7th Infantry from Indiana. They were occupying this town in St. Louis. I can't remember the exact time, but Kathy was there, and naturally they freed the slaves, and they made her a cook. Now this was in 1862.
Okay.
So for 3 years, from 1862 to 65, Kathy traveled with this white infantry unit. She was at a town, I think someplace in Alabama or Mississippi, when that white unit came across the 54th Infantry. And this was Kathy's first exposure to black troops or African American troops. This gave her the idea that maybe she wanted to become a soldier. After the war, Kathy, very, very independent. After the war, what she did was she got with her cousin and a friend, and she told them, hey, look, I want to join in the Army. As I said, under this Reorganization Act was just forming, say, I want to be a soldier. So what she did was she dressed in men's clothing, and she joined the Army. She joined the 38th Infantry.
Mm-hmm.
She fought with the 38th, or was involved in some of the Indian Wars with the 38th Infantry from 1866 until 1868. For 2 years, she was a soldier.
Mm-hmm.
In 1866, she was stationed at Fort Huachuca in Arizona, and she contacted smallpox.
Mm-hmm.
So naturally, they took her to a dispensary,
Mm-hmm.
gave her a thorough examination, and found out that she was a woman.
Yep.
And they gave her a discharge, a medical discharge. She tried for several years after her discharge to get a pension,
Mm-hmm.
but the Army, claimed that she had enlisted under false pretense
Mm-hmm.
and just never honored her with a pension.
Yeah.
But she was the only woman to ever become a Buffalo Soldier.
Wow.
And as I said, the physical at the time when she joined it was so simple. They just, they hit your chest, make sure it's sound wind, and make sure you had all your teeth.
Take a deep breath, look at your,
Take
look
a
in the
deep
mouth.
breath,
Yeah.
and all, 10 fingers. And the reason for this was because the weapons they were using was the old powdered things where you would bite off the black powder, pour it down the barrel with the ramrod, and then fire.
So they had to make sure they could do all that.
Yeah, so you do all that, and that was it.
That's the physical, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a shame though. Yeah, it's a shame about she served again. Women not allowed to serve in the military until more recent history even, and then serving and fighting and then essentially getting nothing.
Absolutely,
An unfortunate trend with all of this.
Yeah, and when she died, she was buried, I believe, someplace in Oklahoma. But at the time, they said that her grave marker was made of wood. That's long gone, it's deteriorated.
Yeah, at that point.
And so there's really no sign or reference as to where she's buried.
Yeah, that's awful. Let's talk about Tommy Taylor a little bit, the Zulu warrior. I thought he was a very interesting person. So he was from Africa, correct?
Tommy was an African prince.
Yeah.
Yeah, that had joined the 24th Infantry at the Battle of San Juan Hill.
Yeah.
Yeah, Tommy, he participated with the 24th in the charge up to San Juan Hill. And it didn't read too much about Tommy, but after the war, he returned to his homeland in Zululand and became a chief. But I think his father sent him to America because he was the next in line for succession, and they wanted to know something about American tactics, military tactics. Like that. And I think that was the reason why he joined the 24th.
Yeah, that was really interesting to see because most of it is people in it's African Americans. It's people who've already been brought over here.
Yeah.
And then you have the Zulu warrior who came over. I thought that was very interesting.
Tommy was a Zulu.
Yeah. Let's see who else. Okay, you have to tell me more. The one I want to know more about the Iron Riders because that was I didn't even know for military history. Of course, I should have had an inkling that was that bicycles were an invention, but
it was General Miles.
Okay.
Who was in charge of African American troops at the time. Miles had toyed with the idea of replacing a horse with a bicycle. He thought that it would be more, less expensive and keep the maintenance on a horse and all like this, but that never materialized. But it was, I think, in 1897, there was the 25th Infantry, Buffalo Soldiers. They were stationed at Fort Missoula in Montana, I believe.
Okay.
And they decided, or their commanding officer decided that what he wanted to do was, in following Miles's orders, was to ride from Fort Missoula to St. Louis, Missouri, a distance of over 2,000 miles.
Yeah.
It took them 30 days to do it. They carried full field packs, their weapons, and everything. They carried something like 50, 60 pounds of equipment on the bike.
Mm-hmm.
As I said, it took 34 days to do it. They traveled in all kinds of weather, mud and uphill, downhill, and crossing streams and everything. And when they reached St. Louis, they got one heck of a welcome.
Yeah.
And surprisingly, all along the route, all along this 1,800 or 2,000 mile route, the people would come out and they would cheer him on. There's these black soldiers riding bicycles.
Yeah.
And people would feed them
Yeah.
along the way. It was just so surprising.
Yeah.
During that time.
Yeah.
All the way a distance of, I think it was 1,900 miles.
Interesting.
But they took the train back to
Go-
Fort
go-
Missoula.
yeah, go
And when they left Fort Missoula to go fight at San Juan Hill, the townspeople gave them a rousing, a goodbye farewell.
Yeah.
The entire town turned out just to cheer him on.
Yeah.
When they left Fort Missoula, they went to Cuba to fight at San Juan Hill.
Wow, yeah. And then after that, I feel like they just kind of gave up on the bicycles. It
didn't materialize.
It did.
It did
As
not.
we know, neither of us rode bicycles in the Army.
Yeah,
at least
it
not
never
for at
materialized.
least not to travel. Well, let's see. Okay, Charlie Young. We had talked about this before we started recording.
Yeah.
So this was during the time where it was the 7th and 9th Cavalry were the two cavalry. Now the 7th and 9th both African American, or was the 7th?
The 7th Cavalry was General Custer's cavalry.
That's General Custer's cavalry.
All white.
Yeah.
All white.
And he was not okay with.
No, Custer refused to have blacks in his command. He said that we were cowards. We would not fight. Despite the fact that at that time there was something like 18 or 19 had won Medal of Honors during the Indian Wars, as well as the Civil War.
Proven that they're
fighters,
proven
but
fighters.
Custer would not have us in his army. Charles Young was the third African American to graduate from West Point.
Wow.
The first was Henry Flipper. He was the one I think we had discussed that was court-martialed for allegedly stealing money from quartermasters. The second was John Alexander. And the third was Charles Young. Now, Young, interesting fact about him was that Young was the first superintendent of the National Park Service, guarding Yellowstone as well as the giant sequoias and the redwood trees. He fought in the Mexican Expeditionary War. Young was the highest ranking black officer at the time, too, when he had made colonel, Colonel Charles Young. And eventually, posthumously, he was made general, General Young. Young, to prove his fitness, rode a horse during the First World War from Ohio to Washington, D.C.
Oh, my God.
to prove that he was fit to command. However, our government would not reactivate him. He was given a medical discharge and put on the inactive list after the Spanish-American War, or the war in the Philippines, and they would not reactivate him during the First World War because had Young been reactivated at that time, he was a colonel. Not only would he have been given orders to white enlisted men,
but white officers.
he would have been given orders to white officers.
And that wouldn't have been okay.
That was a no-no.
Of course, yeah.
So you could not reactivate him.
Wow.
They said that because of his illness, he had caught malaria in the Philippines, he couldn't do it. So to prove that he was physically fit, he rode the horse.
Wow.
From Ohio to D.C., but the government still would not reactivate him. Now, Young, what he did was, when he was a second lieutenant, just fresh out of West Point, he was stationed at Fort Sill, Oklahoma.
Mm-hmm.
While stationed there, he met a master sergeant by the name of Benjamin Davis.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
Okay, yeah.
Now, Young had saw promise in this master sergeant, thought that he would make good officer material. So Young sort of took him under his wings.
Mm-hmm.
He tutored him, and he encouraged him to go to the officer school at Fort Leavenworth.
Mm.
So I believe it was in 1901
Mm-hmm.
or something. This young sergeant that had gone to officer school came back to Fort Sill a second lieutenant.
Okay.
That was Benjamin O. Davis Sr.
Senior, yeah.
Okay. And Benjamin O. Davis Sr. was the very first black man to be promoted to the rank of brigadier general.
Wow.
The first black general in the Army.
Yeah, and the connection between the two, that's amazing.
So
that's
Young,
good.
So Young, as I said, he was stationed at Fort Sill, Oklahoma.
Mm-hmm.
Now, at that time, there was a white lieutenant with the 7th Cavalry
Mm-hmm.
by the name, oh God, what was his name? I want to say Baskin, but it was
Was it Baldwin?
Baldwin.
Baldwin.
Thank you. There was a white lieutenant named Baldwin. He was stationed at Fort Apache in Arizona. He was the first lieutenant.
Mm-hmm.
Young was the senior second lieutenant.
Okay.
Okay. Now, according to military regulations and policies, the next highest ranking second lieutenant should receive the promotion of first lieutenant.
Mm-hmm.
Baldwin, the white lieutenant with the 7, resigned his commission,
Mm-hmm.
which meant that Young should have gotten that slot as first lieutenant.
Right.
Now, you could not have a black lieutenant in a white outfit giving orders to white enlisted men. That was a no-no. So what the Army did in its infinite wisdom,
Yeah.
the Army promoted Young to first lieutenant. However, he was still stationed at Fort Sill, Oklahoma, with the 9th and the 10th Cav.
Yeah. He was granted that position in the 7th Cavalry on the books.
Right.
So he was
Right.
in Custer's army
Right.
as
For-
one of his first
Right,
lieutenants.
for I think it was about a year and a half,
Yeah.
you had a black man
Yeah.
in General Custer's army.
On paper.
On paper only, but the physical body
Wow.
was stationed at Fort Sill, Oklahoma.
I can't imagine how that made Custer feel. I'm sure he had a hold, but I think it's you know, and then after that too, he was put back with the 9th. Is that correct as
Yeah.
well? Yeah.
Yeah.
So he didn't even get to actually serve or do anything with the 7th.
Yeah, one of the guys, one of the original Buffalo soldiers, had said after the incident, when Custard was Custard last night, he said that Custard refused to have us in his army, and I think his exact quote was, "I sure am glad." I think
just after what happened.
I think that was his exact quote. Boy, am I glad.
Oh, that is good. That is a very positive way of facing racism.
Hey, wow.
That was a good way of handling it. That's Oh my goodness. Well, let's finish before we get to World War One. I just want to touch on I want to touch on the Brownsville affair because that was before World War One, and that was something that was another example of unfortunately white government fearing the reaction of the public.
Yeah, we were I think it was the 24th that was stationed at Brownsville, Texas, and it was very, very bad for them there because Texas was just so bad as far as racism and the lynchings that they just could not stand black troops there. what happened one night in August, I think, 19, I can't recall the exact date, was that someone had went into town and shot up the town, in which a deputy sheriff was killed, and I think a store owner was killed. The townspeople said that it was the black troops that was stationed at Fort Davis, just outside of Brownfield. So what they did was they said that they wanted the guilty party, to come to trial. But none of the troops at none of the 24th participated in this thing. So they wanted a guilty party.
Yeah, they wanted someone to blame.
They wanted someone to blame. No one admitted it because nobody did anything,
Yeah,
they were not involved, is what I'm trying to say. So President Roosevelt, in his infinite wisdom once again, trying to be reelected, what he did was he court-martialed, I think it was 167 African Americans. And some of these troops, Buffalo Soldiers, had fought with him at San Juan Hill. He court-martialed 167, just to be reelected.
Yeah.
Okay. So I think it was out of the 167, only about 3 lived long enough to be exonerated and to receive a pension.
Yeah.
But for 167 Buffalo Soldiers, it was nothing.
Yeah.
And quite, incidentally, that was when, politically speaking, if I may, just for a second, up until that time and prior to that time, most blacks, most African Americans were Republicans, because of Lincoln, the party of the Republicans. But after that incident, the African American leaders, like Du Bois, Ida B. Wells, and all of the founders of the NAACP, they held a convention, I believe it was in Atlanta, and they said that because Roosevelt is not doing anything, Roosevelt was a Republican, is not doing anything for us. The lynchings are there, the discrimination, all of these various things are happening. Maybe we should turn our party to the Democratic Party. And this was one of the main reasons why the African Americans came from the Republican Party to the Democratic Party.
Yeah.
Because of that incident.
Yeah.
Yeah. And a number of the things, Roosevelt not doing anything to curtail or to stop all the lynchings that were going on at that time.
Yeah. It's definitely disappointing for that. All right, let's go through. We're gonna do a little bit. We'll do it not a speed round because we've been talking good. But let's talk about World War I and World War II together. We're gonna do those together.
Okay.
Why don't we start with? Let's start with the Harlem Hellfighters in World War I, and we'll go into Henry Johnson and Freddie Stowers a little bit. So, who were the Harlem Hellfighters?
Harlem Hellfighters were the 369th Infantry out of New York. They got the name Harlem Hellfighters from actually the Germans. The Germans called them Black Devils or SWAT, something like that. They called them Black Devils because of their fierce fighting. When they came to, when at the start of the war, start of World War I, we could not fight we Americans could not fight in the Rainbow Coalition.
Right.
General Blackjack Pershing, said that black was not a color of the rainbow. So black could not fight alongside of all of the other divisions in the First World War. So we were assigned to the French. We were given French helmets and French rifles. And the American High Command always said that to the French command, don't treat them like, like they're equals. because they've got to come back to America, and our policies does not,
Ugh,
show the
yeah. That's
does not show the
disgusting. Yeah.
American
Okay.
black man as an equal.
Yeah.
So these orders were given to the French High Command.
Wow.
However, the French, they loved us.
Yeah. Yeah.
They loved us because of
They
the
saw.
fighting
They
ability.
saw you. Yeah.
And we received something like, I think it was 11 quadrilleers, which is the equivalent of the American Medal of Honor.
Yeah.
We stayed on the unit or on the front lines or in the trenches for the longest of any American outfit with the French.
Yeah, wasn't it like 6 months without being relieved?
Without being relieved.
Yeah, no one coming to stop. Yeah, that's a
no.
long time to be on the front.
And Henry Johnson won the Medal of Honor. He wasn't awarded that until, later on, in like about 80-something years later.
Yeah.
But Johnson saved along with Stower, they saved his, I can't think of his name right now, but he saved one of his comrades from being captured by the Germans.
Mm-hmm.
He killed something like 11 members of a German patrol by himself, armed with a knife or bowler knife,
Yep.
as well as a pistol.
Yep. Didn't you take 21 wounds, like stab wounds or something
and
like that?
Yeah, I received something like 21 stab wounds, and just, he never received the recognition for it.
Yeah.
But the French
did though. Yeah.
the French gave him, awarded him rather the Croix de Guerre along with Stower.
Yeah, and I think that's a theme that we kind of see throughout both World War I and World War II.
And in the Second World War, there was an incident with we were fighting then. We were as a unit. The blacks were fighting as a unit with the 92nd or the 93rd Division, Buffalo Division. Pardon me. And there was I mentioned him in the book also. Fox, Lieutenant John R. Fox. Fox was stationed.
This story.
Yeah, Fox was stationed in Italy, and it was a small town. I can't pronounce the name, but the Germans were overrunning the town. Fox was a forward observer. In the military terms, he was calling in artillery.
Yeah, he's the one, for people who don't know, forward observer is the one who's got the binoculars saying, "Hey, the shells are landing here.
Right.
You need to turn it to the right or bring it closer."
And he's directing the fire.
He's directing, because they can't see. They can't,
he's the fire
they can't see
direction
where things
center,
are landing.
calling back to the fire direction center, calling where the shells are falling.
Very dangerous job.
So as the Americans were withdrawing from this town, Fox, along with two other partisans, Italian fighters, he was calling in the rounds. And the operator at the fire directing center was telling him, "Hey, look, these rounds are getting too close. Pull out, pull out, pull out." So Fox stayed there and kept telling, fire, fire, fire. So his last command was fire it. After that, the radio went dead. Now, when the Americans came back and retook the town, they found his body amongst 100 dead German soldiers. He had called rounds in on himself.
Yep.
And for that act of heroism and sacrifice, the toy company, Mattel, in 2005, in their G.I. Joe action series, they made an action figure of him, on his knees, calling in artillery rounds.
Yeah, that's and I think he did that, but he secured the retreat of the people of that town as well. But that's the thing, is that did he take out a bunch? He stayed there so that other people could get out before him, to make sure that.
And for that, he also received the Medal of Honor. And I believe that, I wish I could think of the town, but in this town, they have a plaque, a memorial of him, even to this day.
Yeah, I think that is a true heroic story for sure. Another person Vernon Baker was another Medal of Honor recipient.
Vernon was another one.
Yeah, he took out some
several machine
machine guns. Yep.
He was also with the 92nd Division.
Yeah.
Also lieutenant. And I believe Vernon just died recently.
Oh, wow.
Because he was awarded the Medal of Honor by none other than President Obama.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
But yeah, again,
Yeah.
years and years later,
Right.
70 years later, I was going to say there was a lot of people that had that same sort of treatment of years and years and years later receiving these medals of honor.
Lieutenant Bullard, who was he was in World War One.
Mm-hmm.
They called him the Black Swallow of Death.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. He was the pilot, correct?
He was a pilot during World War One with the French Army.
Wow, yeah.
He could not fly with the Americans.
Yeah. And he would now if I'm trying to remember your book. All of this is information that I got from you, so I don't want to take credit for it.
Yeah.
But his story as well, he fought in World War One, and then when World War II was happening, and America got involved. He tried to go to America to fight for America, and they wouldn't let him.
They would not take him.
Yeah,
They would not take him.
Yeah, and after already proving himself
he
as
was a combat pilot.
Yeah,
he was a combat pilot awarded here again the Aquatic Air.
Yeah,
he was a combat pilot during the First World War, but the American Army Air Force, because the Air Force was not valid then, they refused to take him.
Wow.
A veteran, experienced combat pilot.
Yeah.
They wouldn't take.
They wouldn't take him.
Now, I will say in retrospect what they've done at the Air Force Academy in Colorado. They have a special exhibit of him with all of his medals and his uniform, and he was made honorary second lieutenant. They do honor him now at the Air Force Academy.
Yeah.
But then, no.
Yeah. Still, yeah. Then is when it mattered the most. That is when you could have had a pilot on your side. So I'm going to go through just a couple more people that these were in the book. We talked about Benjamin O. Davis Sr., who was the first Black Brigadier General, and then he had a son, correct?
Benjamin O. Davis Jr.
Yeah. So what was his story?
Ben Jr., he was the fourth African American to graduate from West Point in 1936. It was 46 years after Lieutenant Charles Young had graduated.
Wow.
There was no blacks at West Point until that time.
Wow.
In 1936, that's when Benjamin O. Davis Jr. graduated from West Point.
Wow. Yeah. So that legacy lived on.
And he was also the commander of the Tuskegee Airmen.
Yes.
The Red Tails.
Yes.
Yeah, who never lost a plane due to enemy fire.
Yeah, I was gonna say we didn't talk about. I didn't even bring that up. The because they had something like 11,000 missions or planes secured.
And never lost a plane.
Yeah,
because the men were so disciplined. Most white pilots, they wanted to be ace. So anytime the Messerschmitts or the German would attack the squadron that would be flying to bomb, they would take off after the fighters and try to shoot the fighters down, leaving the bombers, vulnerable to that second attack.
Yeah.
But the Red Tails, they would never leave the bombers. They would stay with the bombers.
Yeah. That's interesting.
And one incident, I cannot, the names can't say.
There's lots of names.
This brother from the Red Tails, they were coming back from a bombing mission, and they came across what we call in the Army target of opportunity. Okay, it was a battleship, a German battleship, and they swooped down on it, and they just firing the 50s, and all of a sudden, boom! They blew up a battleship. Okay,
just on the way back.
On the way back,
Wow.
They blew up a battleship. So you get back to base, and they're relating the story like, "Hey man, we sank this battleship and everything." could you shoot a battle? You know, bombs. All you had was just these 50 caliber
Yeah,
machines.
yeah, yeah.
How could you sink a battleship?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. But what happened was that in strafing the battleship, evidently they hit the ammunition.
Oh my
that's what
goodness. That's a good shot then.
Right. And they didn't realize that until they looked at the film on the wing cameras
Yeah, yeah.
of their P-51.
Wow.
It's, oh, these guys sunk a battleship.
It's crazy, yeah. That's an amazing story. I can't believe that. We also didn't even talk about the triple nickel parachuters.
Triple nickel.
Yup.
Yeah.
They were the first African American.
airborne.
Yeah, first airborne.
Airborne. They were assigned.
They were also the first. I think it said they were the first smoke jumpers.
They were.
Too.
They were
Yeah.
because they were not used during the Second World War.
Yeah.
Not as paratroopers. They made their first combat jump in Korea.
Wow.
But usually, when they were formed, they were assigned to the California coast to fight fight forest fires.
Yeah.
That's why they call them the first smoke jumpers.
Yeah.
Smoke jumpers.
I had to look that up. I read it in the book, and I was like,
Yeah.
"What's a smoke jumper?" I didn't
Yeah.
realize it was a
They were
firefighters.
Yeah, they were firefighters.
That's
the
so
very first.
interesting.
Yeah, the triple nickel.
Yeah. And then there was also, let's see, June 1942, the first Black Marines. That was when they were first allowed to join the Marine Corps.
Yeah.
That was a pretty big deal. And then the 761st in 1944,
Tankers.
also the first tank battalion.
These guys, during the Battle of the Bulge, they were the lead elements in Patton's army.
Yeah.
March across Europe was the 761st.
Wow.
You don't hear that.
Yeah.
Another interesting story about, if I may.
Yeah,
about
of
them.
course. Yeah.
If you remember the movie Patton with George C. Scott,
Yeah.
when Patton was speaking before this huge American flag, and
Yeah,
giving his
yeah,
rousing
yep.
speech, he was speaking to the 761st. Though that's why you never showed the picture of the soldiers, but that was the 761st.
Ah.
The incident was that what happened during the Normandy invasion, Patton, being a tanker and believe in don't take land, you just keep moving forward. Patton lost a lot of tanks during the invasion. Some by German fire, some were sank in the canal, in the English Canal.
Yeah.
They never made it on shore.
Yeah.
Patton needed and wanted tankers. The 761st was never supposed to see the war.
Wow, really?
They trained at Fort Hood, Texas for 2 years.
Wow.
Never saw the war. But because Patton had lost so many tanks, he said, I don't give a darn. Hey, look.
Just say, yeah.
But I don't give a darn. Hey, I want and I need tankers.
Yeah.
Okay? So he sent for the 761st. And that's when he gave the speech. Hey, I want you to, get out there and do this and do that and gung-ho, blood and guts and all like this.
Wow.
But they were never supposed to see the war.
Wow.
And their motto, the motto of the 761st was come out fighting. They got the motto from, of all people, Joe Louis.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Joe Louis had 2 championship fights,
Yeah.
heavyweight fights. The first fight, he fought Max Smelling, Smelling beating. Okay, that's when Hitler was, the superiority of the Aryan race, and all like this here. So Louis trained for the second fight. The second fight, when he fought Smelling, he beat Smelling. But when they asked Louis, well, Joe, how are you going to train for this fight? The second fight, the second championship fight. Say, I'm going to come out fighting.
Yeah.
The 761st took that motto, and that was their motto.
That's amazing.
Come out fighting.
Come out fighting.
The Black Panther.
Yeah, the
was
Black
original Black
Panther.
Panther.
Yeah, that's amazing. Yeah, the history is boundless. Honestly, one more person I want to talk about. Lieutenant General Nadia West.
Nadia, I don't know much about Nadia.
That was a more recent one.
Yeah, Nadia. If I'm not mistaken, Nadia was the first African American to graduate from the Point.
Yeah.
I don't know if she's still I haven't done that much recent research on her, but at the time, she was the highest ranking African American woman.
Yeah.
And I believe she was also the Surgeon General of the Army.
Yeah. She was made definitely big splashes within just females being active in the military and African American females.
Yeah.
Pretty big deal for that. I'm pretty impressed with that too.
When you look back on their service, on their sacrifices.
Yes.
See, because we all, myself and every soldier today, especially black soldier, we stood on the shoulders of these Buffalo Soldiers.
Yeah.
And Colin would be the first one to tell you, hey, I would not have made chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff had it not been for me standing on the shoulders of these great men.
Wow. Absolutely.
But it was Colin Powell
that
made that quote. No. Speaking of the sacrifices and the contributions of the African American.
Yeah, and I think that your book is also showing that, and I'm really happy that you were encouraged by your motorcycle club to put that out and to put that together. Honestly, thank you so much for all this information too. Honestly, now what are you doing currently, Rob? What do you got going on? Your club and stuff?
Currently with the Buffalo Soldier Motorcycle Club.
Yeah.
What we're doing now, our unofficial motto is just doing good in the hood.
Doing good. I love that.
Yeah. So what we try to do, be involved in community events like fundraising for the Sickle Cell Foundation. Mm-hmm. We work with Yukon in conjunction with that. We've contributed several $1,000s to that research program because sickle cell is a disease that really affects the African American community.
Yeah.
We have a pancake breakfast every year, about September, October. It's a fundraiser for the food pantry at Shiloh Baptist Church, and as well as Stand Down for Veterans, as well as participating in a number of charitable rides or anything we can do to assist the community.
Yeah. Is there a way for people to look up where you've got events or where they can donate or anything?
Yeah, if I could just give our website.
Yeah, what's the website?
Our website is Buffalo Soldier Motorcycle Club, BSMC, Hartford, and .org. So,
.org.
Yeah, Buffalo Soldier Motorcycle Club.org. And you could go on our website if you care to support us or just tell a little bit about our club and our chapter.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. No, I really appreciate that. We'll definitely get that word out there.
Yeah.
But thank you so much again for being here.
It was an honor.
It was honestly a great conversation. You gave so much information and just I appreciate you taking the time to educate people.
It was my honor.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you so much for being here. And that's going to wrap it up for us here. Thank you everybody for seeing the show today, and we'll see you next time for the next episode. Take it easy.